I can't believe what I'm seeing. Did Jon Stewart just take to task the duplicity in the Democratic ranks after the DNC? This takedown he did on The Daily Show gives us so much more to talk about, so subscribe to the channel, watch this incredible clip before we dive in.
The Democrats, on short notice, exploited their newfound momentum and enthusiasm with a display of the breadth and width of this diverse, often contradictory party of Roosevelt. At their convention, they had union leaders and CEOs. They had Democratic Party icons and lifelong Republicans. They had a guy yelling, "Screw the billionaires," followed immediately by a very happy billionaire. It's all okay if it's our billionaire. I don't like billionaires, but he's all right. They had guys making fun of people for going to Yale, and a bunch of people who went to Yale.
I don't know about you, but I think Jon Stewart at least deserves credit for saying that in a media culture where most late-night show hosts and comedians like Jimmy Kimmel or John Oliver would just serve the same political takes, it does take a degree of grit to go against the usual tone of the show. And while there's no doubt that a majority of John's audience lean Democrat, did you hear the loud cheers when he pointed out the blatant duplicity in the DNC? From what I've researched, The Daily Show has a live audience and does not explicitly use the laugh track for the show, and that makes the audience's reception of the joke even more interesting from a political perspective, because perhaps people are already hungry for something other than their political biases being reaffirmed even in a comedic setting. That perhaps struck an even greater chord with the audience because it's actually true. The Democratic National Convention last month was somewhat of a strange mix of contradictory characters all gathering around to crowd Kamala Harris as the party nominee. And it doesn't just have to do with the Democratic idea on economics, but stretches far beyond into the realm of domestic policies and international conflicts. As you'll see later on, people inside the party, including Bernie Sanders, who constantly preach about taking money out of politics, sat comfortably in the front seat, with a billionaire like J.B. Pritzker with a long history of campaign donations to the Democratic Party.
We need an economy that works for all of us, not just the billionaire class. My fellow Americans, when 60% of our people live paycheck to paycheck, the top 1% have never, ever had it so good.
That's despite the fact that Bernie Sanders is a millionaire himself and is part of the same 1% class that decries so much as the root of all troubles. That's not to mention Democrat mega donors like Michael Bloomberg and Reid Hoffman, who are conveniently never mentioned at a convention like this. But this was only the beginning, because I think what Jon Stewart said next cut very close to the bone for the party and is probably going to make some very angry people.
The Democrats had people who prosecuted sexual predators and... There goes that booking. Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, gay Americans, Jewish Americans, Palestinian Americans. To be fair, it was only 4 nights, 8 hours a night. But really, it's best not to think about the consequences of our actions over there, especially given the theme of the week.
I can feel the excitement in this arena. It's filled with energy and with joy.
The air of joy.
Joy. Joy. Joy.
We will be joyful warriors.
The president of joy.
Let us choose joy.
Yes. Yes, yes. Oh, it was joyful. For a convention. I know what real joy looks like. because I've watched Oprah on her show.
The last part was actually true because there were some unfortunate details that emerged soon after the DNC had concluded, with Palestinian-American Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib alleging that neither she nor any Palestinian voice was present at the convention. She remarked in an interview last week, quote, "It's hard not to feel invisible as a Palestinian American. Our trauma and pain feel unseen and ignored by both parties. One party uses our identity as a slur, the other refuses to hear from us." Rashid is the same congresswoman that made airwaves a few weeks ago for holding up a sign against Benjamin Netanyahu during his visit and address to Congress. Moreover, she even urged Michigan voters to cast their vote against Joe Biden as he was still running, which shows you a glimpse into the political disillusionment from some quarters that could cost the party electorally. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, also had some words during the convention that simply don't line up with the facts. Here's what she said about the start of the Russian-Ukraine war, keeping in mind it was her and Biden's administration that has been in power for 2 years when the war started.
He encouraged Putin to invade our allies, said Russia could, quote, do whatever the hell they want. 5 days before Russia attacked Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky to warn him about Russia's plan to invade. I helped mobilize a global response, over 50 countries, to defend against Putin's aggression. And as president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
It's incredible because while she sets out lofty goals of ending the war, no one seems to be questioning why she doesn't do anything now given she's already in office as the VP. Not just that, Donald Trump had no impact on American foreign policy in February of 2022 for any such words to even count, but words that did create a rippling impact on it were Joe Biden as president seeming to allow a minor incursion into Ukraine by Russia, which was criticized even by some European leaders for failing to draw a hard line for Vladimir Putin.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
You said that Russia would be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. Are you saying that a minor incursion by Russia into Ukrainian territory would not lead to the sanctions that you have threatened, or are you effectively giving Putin permission to make a small incursion into the country?
Good question. That's how it did sound like, didn't it? The most important thing to do, big nations can't bluff, number one. Number two, the idea that we would do anything to split NATO, which would have a profound impact on profound impact on one of Putin's objectives is to weaken NATO, would be a big mistake.
All of this makes for a pretty confusing mix when it comes to the Democratic National Convention, since it doesn't seem to have a problem with blatant contradictions on the same stage, and doing that while also shutting out important voices that truly need to be heard, creating a diversity that's only skin deep. But let me know in the comments how you see all of it playing out in the election, because the voter base is watching closely to see how the party reflects and represents them.